Well, good morning. How wonderful it is to have you here. Russell Hancock, I'm the president and CEO of Joint Venture Silicon Valley and of our institute, the Institute for Regional Studies. We are met at Evergreen Valley College, a wonderful spot on the Silicon Valley landscape, and I would like you now to meet the president of Evergreen Valley College, Tamil Gilkerson.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, welcome. I can't see any of you. So the lights are so bright, I can't see you, but welcome to Evergreen Valley College. We are so pleased to be hosting today the Joint Venture Silicon Valley and the Institute for Regional Studies poll briefing. And I have to tell you, so Evergreen Valley College is home to more than 9,000 students this semester. We are an award-winning transfer college that reflects the students in San Jose. And really, actually, we're pleased and proud to be a federally designated Hispanic serving institution and an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institution. So we really do reflect and serve the residents in this area. And we have the highest CSU transfer, UC transfer rate, and admittance rate to San Jose State University is our top feeder institution. We really are built on the core values of opportunity, equity, and social justice. And I want to give acknowledgement to the Board of Trustees who are here today, who really actually live these values in the way in which they serve. So again, Trustee Tony Alexander is here today, Trustee Maria Fuentes, Trustee Wendy Ho is here as well. And we have two student trustees, our Evergreen Valley College student trustee, Jemima Ulafade, and our San Jose City College student trustee, Jocelyn Solorio, Jocelyn. And I want to acknowledge, we have our Associated Student Government President here, Mark Ilano, and one of our student centers, T2, is also here with her, and then our Academic Senate President, Dr. Gary Johnson, who's also a nursing faculty here in our award-winning nursing program. Yay, Gary. Yeah, Gary stood up. Thank you, Gary. I just really want to say how grateful I am to Russ and the entire team. We use this data, and I use this data regularly in the work that we do in the college to really be thinking about centering and eradicating sort of the wealth disparities in our community and bridging people to economic and thriving prosperity. I recently published a study for the California Community College System on homelessness, food, and housing insecurity for California's community college students, which was a survey over 66,000 students in our system, telling us how disparate and desperate they are in terms of meeting their basic needs and securities. So today's poll briefing, the opportunity to hear from these panelists is really going to be helping us in our work, both statewide and here at the college. And so welcome again to Evergreen. I hope you have an opportunity to walk around this beautiful college community that has been supported so wonderfully and generously by the residents and voters in this area. Welcome again.
Thank you, President Gilkerson. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the role that this college plays in our ecosystem. If you're in the back, I want to encourage you to come up front. I think we might have a better experience if we were to do that. Don't feel obligated, but I think you might have a better experience. There's lots of seating up here. While you're doing that, I just want to give you an overview of the program today. I'm about to brief you. And then after my briefing, we will spend some time giving you some technical notes on the process and procedure that we employed with the poll this year. Then we're privileged to have performers from Evergreen Valley College. They're going to give us a dramatic presentation for just a few minutes. Then we'll go to a break. And you'll refresh your drinks and grab some things. You'll come back and you will meet our distinguished panel who are here to help us unpack all of the information that we're sharing with you today, and we're going to adjourn at noon. That's the plan. Now, before we embark, there's some people that I want to thank. First is Kaiser Permanente, who is our event sponsor. We're so grateful to have their generosity making this work possible and making this event possible. Dr. Rakesh Chowdhury was to have been here. He's the Chief Medical Officer at the Santa Clara campus. You may know already that they have just entered into some very careful negotiations with their labor force, and so that's ongoing right now, and there was an exigent situation for the doctor. So I am conveying his welcome as well, and we surely do thank Kaiser. Now, I also want you to know that the annual Silicon Valley Poll is a partnership, and it's a robust partnership. One of our partners is the Bay Area News Group, a superb partner to be working with, and of course, as a media partner, they play that vital role of promulgating this information. So we're very grateful for that. Very grateful not only to have them as media partners, but also as thought partners in this exercise. And then you should also thoroughly understand that the poll is placed in the field by people we consider to be the very best, a Silicon Valley polling firm, a disruptive firm at that, changing the face of polling as we know it. And that would be Embold Research, and you'll be meeting people from the Embold team when we talk about the technical particulars. So that's the partnership, and we're grateful for all of that. Now, I would like to launch into my briefing. Before I do, I'd like to just reflect, if I may, for a moment, just personally. I personally want to tell you that the information we'll be presenting is sometimes difficult. We are reporting on things that are about grim subjects. We're reporting on things that have to do with desperate situations, and as you'll see, folks in our region right now are tense. There's anxiety. There is a sense of gloom that has settled on our region. I take no pleasure whatsoever in talking about things that aren't happy to hear, and yet that's what we'll be doing. And I just want you to know that there's a personal dimension, and I think we would all feel that way. And yet my role, my job, and I'm committed to it, is to be clinical and just to present the information. And I'm going to do that as faithfully as I possibly can. So thank you for joining us in that spirit. Let's begin. Let's talk about the poll. The poll is divided into two sections. The first section is a set of questions that we ask every year, and we just track them over time, and we'd like to see what the movement is. So we begin, and then the second part of the poll is questions, subjects that are timely, topical, top of mind things for the region right now. So that's what you'll hear today. We'll start with the recurring questions, and we'll give you a sense of all of that. One other comment, if I may, before we really launch in. Joint venture and our institute have been, since 1995, releasing the Silicon Valley Index. I think many of you are well familiar with that. The index is an exercise in measuring the region and presenting those facts, just the facts. We just put them out there. The poll is a different exercise altogether, and we see this as a companion piece, a counterpart. The poll is not reporting facts. The poll is reporting how we feel and how we think. And we consider both to be vital forms of intelligence. The facts that we put on the table, but then how people feel about those facts, and then all of it needs to be assessed, analyzed, understood, unpacked, if we're really going to be in a position to address the challenges that we face. So understand, the poll is, we're doing that in that spirit. That's the question we're asking. How do people feel? I mean, what are they thinking right now? Well, we ask this question. Is the Bay Area on the wrong track, on the right or the wrong track? What do you think? Well, you might be interested to know that they think the U.S. is definitely on the wrong track. California, a little better. The Bay Area, look at that. 71% of respondents think that the Bay Area has somehow gotten off on the wrong rail. And that's an increase of 7 points over last year. In fact, it's an increase of 17 points over the last 2 years. So a sense, things are going badly wrong in the Bay Area right now. Then we asked, do you think the quality of life is getting better over the last 5 years? Better, same, or worse? We posed that question. Well, here's your answer. 78%. That's, by the way, in the polling business, that's a big number, just so you understand. We're showing you big numbers today. That's a big result. 78% think their situation is actually getting worse. Then, throughout the poll, there's stratifications. By the way, the poll exists online. You go to the joint venture website. You can delve into all of the crosstabs. You can pull up all of the demographics. You can slice, dice, process to your heart's content. We'll throw out some interesting factoids as we go along. Here's one. If you are parents with children at home, still living at home, then even bigger shares think that the situation is getting worse. And then if you have toddlers living at home with you, even worse. 86% think we're not doing so well. And that, by the way, is a 7-point increase. So I mentioned we have stratifications that you can look it up by different demographics. You can look at this data by who you voted for in the last presidential election. You can look at it by your ethnicity. You can look at it by your level of income, by your county, and so on and so forth. I just want you to know that one striking finding of the poll this year, and in most years, is that across most demographics, the results are fairly uniform, not wide distributions. In other words, all the people living here tend to assess these questions about the same way. That's a key finding. But there are exceptions. There are important exceptions, and we'll point those out when we see them. For example, people that are less financially secure, they have even a darker take on this particular question. Interestingly, people who voted Republican in the last election, they also have a very different take on this question, larger segments of that group, and so forth. Okay, now, we said, okay, if things are getting worse in your estimation, what are the issues? What are your top issues? And they were allowed to choose from a list. Here is the list. And again, I want to point out that the top three were cost of housing, homelessness, and the cost of living. So this is where we are. This is where our heads are at. Now, those have risen to the top over previous years. In fact, if we went just 5 years ago, transportation was ranked at the top. And so there's been a lot of movement. Now, the cost of housing, that's been a key issue for us for a very long time. But these other things are rising up to the top, including a new subject altogether, the state of the region's big three downtowns. We'll talk about that. So the top two problems were cost of housing, cost of living. And then it was interesting to us that the bottom two used to be much higher ranked on the list, and we're just pointing out for you that they were bottom of the list this year, and that's striking. The increasing frequency of wildfires, and then racism. We've asked, do you think racism is a serious problem? How would you rank this problem in the Bay Area? And here I am duty-bound to tell you that it is striking, sobering, in fact. To point out that actually we sort ourselves out differently on this question by race. So if you are black or African American, you're seeing this as a more serious problem than your Asian counterparts, even your Hispanic, Latino, or Chicano counterparts, and then same with the white and Caucasian counterparts. So this reveals some disparity. Now, we asked this question. Do you agree? Are you going to move out of the Bay Area over the next few years? We posed the question that way. Do you agree with that statement? Guess what? More than half of respondents are mulling plans to leave the region. Now, that stayed the same from last year. So there's no upward movement, but there's no downward movement either. Meanwhile, a lot of people did, in fact, leave the region. So there's that. And then, again, we have it stratified for you. You probably can't see all of that, but again, interesting stratifications. Republican voters feel more strongly about moving out than Democratic voters, for example. Also, your income level will make a difference on this question. We ask, well, if you're moving, then why? What are the top three reasons? The top is high housing costs. That's followed by quality of life, which people perceive to be eroding in the Bay Area, followed by a new entrant. This is a new one, the amount of homelessness. And then other things that are frequently cited don't actually rise up in the poll. People talk about taxes, they talk about the Bay Area politics, not as high as these other things. And then, just so you know, we were interested to know how people estimate their own financial security. So we asked this question. We, of course, already have data, remember, on income distribution, wealth gaps. We know those things from a factual point of view. But we asked people, how do you rate your own financial stability? There's the result. Almost half of people that live here do not have anything left over when they've met their monthly expenses. Nothing left over. So they view themselves as living on that line, that precarious line. A bad break could spell doom for 44% of us. And then we have stratifications there as well. Okay, so those are recurring questions that this poll takes pains to repeat and to track over time. Now, I'd like to shift gears and talk about the specific things that we probed in the survey this year. And the first was the plight of our region's 3 big towns, specifically San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. We asked a set of questions, and so I'd like to present the high-level findings there. I want to just provide the context for this. This is the context. So the context is vacancy in those 3 big downtowns at very high levels. And you actually haven't seen anything yet, because this is George Avalos at the Mercury publishing this yesterday. Thank you, George. Thank you, Mercury. But it's showing that at the current moment in time, we are about a third vacancy rate. But I'll tell you, a year from now, more leases will have terminated, unused office space. Those numbers are going to be higher. But we're already at a third. A third of downtown office space vacant. Okay, so that's the context. Now, given that, this, by the way, picture that I took. This is downtown San Francisco. This is Battery in California at high noon. I'm telling you, those sidewalks were always just teeming with humanity, and now this is what's going on during the day in our downtowns. Okay, so we asked people, how often do you visit downtowns? Most people are saying rarely or never. That's the result. Large majorities, as you can see, above 70. Are saying, I rarely go to these places. Even higher for Oakland, San Jose in the middle. Now, we asked people, how much are you going to these 3 specific downtowns? And we learned some interesting things. We learned, for example, that more tech workers are actually going downtown. We learned that more young people are finding their way downtown. So that's an interesting finding, maybe an important one. But that's what it looks like for the segment that says, yeah, I do go downtown a certain amount, and that's how they break down. Okay, then for the ones that are not visiting, we said, why? What's the reason? What's keeping you out? And top of the list for San Francisco was that the unhoused population there is an unsettling sight, disturbing even, or they even indicate that there's a feeling that it's not entirely safe or sanitary. So that's number 1 on the list. We thought maybe it was because it's too hard to get around, to park, those kinds of things. Safety rose to the top of the list, but you can see interesting comparisons between the 3. And so that's, anyway, those are the top 3 reasons why people aren't visiting these major downtowns. Then we have to report this finding. It's interesting. In the case of San Jose, a lot of people said, well, I just don't have a reason. I don't have a reason to go to San Jose. That has been hard to hear for our friends in San Jose, for our leaders in San Jose. And Sal Pizarro, I don't know if you're here, Sal, he wrote a terrific response in his column this week. You should read it. It's fabulous. But nevertheless, this is the finding, that people just don't feel like there's a particular need to go to those places. So that's interesting. Now, we also asked, how important do you think the Google campus will be for San Jose's future? And it turns out that folks around the Bay Area think that's actually really important. at least 43% really see that as important, but it's even higher in Santa Clara County. So that's an important finding. Okay, the next subject is, again, one that's so hard to talk about, but it's the rise of homelessness in our region and the way that it exists side by side with so much affluence and so many other things that characterize our region. So to set the context, that's an estimate. We never have precise estimates, but these are based on the last point in time counts, and that would be the estimated total of how many people are unhoused in our region as of last May. And of course, there's been a lot of movement since then, but that includes San Francisco, it includes San Jose, and it includes Oakland, and then it includes the other communities as well. And we're talking about enough people that they could unto themselves constitute a town the size of East Palo Alto, for example. So that is the context for these questions. We asked then the perception of whether homelessness is increasing or not, and realize it's not a factual question, this is a perception question. Facts might be entirely different, but people think that homelessness in their community has become much worse in the community where they live. Almost a plurality, see it that way. Then when you add in people who think it's somewhat worse, well, now you're talking about 70%, more than 70% are thinking that it's, 65 something percent, see it as somewhat or much worse. Others see it as the same. People who think it's getting better, minuscule noise in this model. So that's how people are perceiving the issue. Okay, then we asked some really specific questions, and I'm just going to read some of these to you. We wanted to know if people have a sense of understanding about it. In other words, we posed the question this way. Do you agree that many people in the Bay Area are just a few bad breaks away from being homeless themselves? And large majorities either strongly agree with that or they somewhat agree with that statement. Okay, then we asked, what's the culprit here? And they identified the culprit as affordable housing. We do not create enough affordable housing. That seems logical on the face of it. Okay, then we asked, well, what's your personal experience? Is this personal in any way for you? Have you had experience with a person who is homeless? And what was that experience like? Did it make you feel unsafe? Here we have more than 60% identify themselves as having had that kind of an encounter with an unhoused resident. Do you know anybody yourself who's been homeless? Yes, actually about 48% of us have a friend, acquaintance, family member. Then here's an interesting perception question. Do you agree? Most people who are homeless have come from some other place, and they've decided to be homeless here. About half the respondents perceive that to be the case, so we're split on that question. Finally, we asked this one. People who are homeless are living on the streets of their own choice. It's where they choose to be. And we don't have strong agreement on that question. In fact, more people think, no, that's actually the wrong way to assess the situation. Okay, so that tells you something about our disposition. Now, we thought this would be an important question to pose. And so we posed it this way. As long as there aren't enough homes or shelters to house everyone, then homeless people have a right to live in public places, like sidewalks or under freeway overpasses. And guess what? Only 27% of the sample agree with that statement. So there's what we're seeing here is some frustration level, okay? So that's, we report that result. Okay, then we asked, should communities prevent homeless people from living in public spaces because of health and safety? And 73%. Again, that's a big number in the polling business. So that's how people are thinking about this right now. Okay, but then importantly, we asked, what sort of measures would you support to address homelessness? And here, we are reporting that people are highly supportive of these measures, even when they impinge on their taxpayer dollars. So people are very happy to see more affordable housing being built. Very happy to see short-term financial aid extended to people who are homeless or on the brink of homelessness. Very happy to be providing compact, tiny homes and doing that at more scale than we're doing it currently. The notion that you can provide safe, sanctioned places, that they're designated for that. Then, finally, here's a striking result. People are not supportive of allowing RVs to park on our community streets. The poll doesn't show support for that. Okay, have you heard about the California Care Courts? These are new, introduced by the governor, and the notion here is that you can mandate that people enroll in supportive programs, including rehab programs and treatment programs. In the Bay Area, people are highly supportive of that approach. So that's our finding. Okay, here's my last subject area, and that's about public transit. So let me just set the stage for that. Public transit. Well, here's the context. Caltrain used to be packed to the gills. Now it's fallen off the cliff. People aren't riding the train. Here's BART. You can see BART's cliff as well. BART's ridership has not recovered. Here's how BART's ridership compares to other major metropolitan systems. Look, New York has pretty much recovered their ridership, but there's BART on the very bottom. In other words, we're voting with our feet. We're saying that we ourselves don't want to use transit. Then we actually asked that in the poll. We wanted to check it against our figures. And so, look, 68% say I rarely or never ride transit, and that's the breakdown. This, by the way, is how it compares to the previous year when we asked that question 5 years ago. So that's a trend. Now, this, you might be interested to notice what it looks like by county, and Santa Clara County, where we are seated today, is the lowest on the list for actually using transit, so that's important to know. Okay, so we just asked, should we keep our rail services going, or is it time to think differently about that? Well, it wasn't a resounding majority, but a majority says yes, we have to keep these systems going. Okay, that's one finding. And by the way, interesting shifts, comparisons by partisanship. Okay, then we said, okay, so if you want to keep our rail systems going, how would you like to pay for it? And isn't this always the case? But here they're saying very clearly, well, no, we're not willing to pay for it, but somehow we need to keep these services going. Okay, then we asked, okay, there's rail and there's bus networks. Which would be more important to you if we had to make some strategic investments? Since we can't do everything, what would be your priority? Well, people in this survey prioritize our bus networks, and I'm reading their quote, which is because they are important for low-income residents who are often left behind. And then 48% would support those investments in rail service. Okay, that concludes my poll briefing. That's the key information coming out of the poll, the headlines coming out of the poll. The rest you can see online. You can read our narrative version. You can pull up the crosstabs. You can read the top line results. It's all available to you, and we want you to use it and share it. I would now like to bring to the stage our colleague Trenton Marlar. Trenton, if you'd join me on stage, please. Trenton is with Bold Research, our partner who placed the poll in the field, and I wanted Trenton to share the technical notes so that you will know the methods that were employed to get these results. Trenton, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Russ. Again, my name is Trenton Marlar, and I'm an analyst at Bold Research. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about our company and our methodology before I dive into the specifics of the methodology of this poll, and then offer a few observations based off of my experience as a pollster and what we see in other contexts. So Bold Research is a nonpartisan unit of change research. We are a local company, though a lot of us work remotely. We help leaders make informed decisions, build trust, and get things done by surveying people, everyday people online. Our proprietary methodology, dynamic online sampling, helps us reach people where they are at, their devices, and this helps us deliver accurate results to our clients at an affordable price. And Bold Research has been a trusted partner of joint venture Silicon Valley and the Bay Area News Group. We have conducted the Silicon Valley poll on behalf of these organizations for the past 3 years now. And we're really excited for the opportunity to be here today, be part of the presentation of today's results, and to discuss the poll's methodology in more detail. So to get to the methodology of the poll, this year we surveyed 1,951 adults living in Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties from August 29th to September 5th, so this is very fresh data. This survey was conducted online, and it was available in 4 languages that were spoken in the region, including English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. Respondents were invited to participate in the online survey through a combination of digital online advertisements and recruited via SMS invitations, text to web. Using dynamic online sampling, we were able to adjust our recruitment strategy in real time, which helped us ensure that we were recruiting a cross-section of residents that is reflective of the region's whole population. After recruitment, we then performed post-stratification weighting on age, gender, race and ethnicity, education, 2020 presidential vote, and county to ensure that the sample was not only representative demographically and politically of the region as a whole, but of the 5 individual counties surveyed as well. After weighting and all was said and done, the modeled margin of error for this poll was plus or minus 2.5 percentage points. Russ also invited me to share a few observations of my own about the general, how these results compare to what we see in other contexts. And we do community surveys throughout the country, both in larger cities and smaller communities. And one thing I will point out is that while we are seeing this doom and this pessimistic view in the Bay Area and views of the direction the region is going and the country as a whole, it is really important to point out this is not unique to the Bay Area, not that that means it's not concerning nonetheless. In the communities we look at, we see that in most communities, many Americans, if not a large majority of them, believe that their communities and the country are going in the wrong direction. So this general pessimism and negative sentiment is not unique to the Bay Area and maybe more of a broader reflection, a societal problem. Similarly, we see that the issues that are rising to the top as most pressing to Bay Area residents, things like affordability concerns and homelessness, the state of the downtowns, these are issues that we commonly see rise to the top as well in other cities that we have polled, particularly cities in the West. It is clear that the housing affordability crisis and other economic concerns are top of mind for many people living in cities in the US. And finally, I wanted to provide some sort of bright spots and ways that we can move forward. I know there's a lot of gloom in the results here, but there's important places that we can build on. The first is that there's a strong sense of belonging in the Bay Area and with the individual communities. And this sense of belonging and community can be a resource to move forward and to tackle some of these big problems. Russ pointed this out in the presentation, but we also see fewer residents identifying racism as a serious problem in the region. That's something that speaks for itself. And finally, I think it's important to point out there's widespread support and agreement around the causes of the problem for policies aimed to address homelessness, and this is one of the most pressing issues in the region. So I think having agreement and kind of a way forward where everyone's behind can be really helpful in trying to tackle that problem. If you have any questions about in bold, the methodology used, or specific questions about the poll, I'm happy to answer them after the presentation, or you can reach out and we're happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trenton. Okay, I now have the great fun of introducing some performers. These are students at Evergreen Valley College and their instructor.
John Kaufman.
How nice to have you here.
Nice to have you.
Good. I love this. Don's leading a robust program here in theater arts at the college, and we're about to see some of his students, but it just so happens that the play that they're working on right now is Our Town. Could that be any more appropriate? Yeah. So please introduce your students, and we're going to see one scene from Our Town.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is John Kaufman, and I teach theater here at EVC, and I'm directing Our Town with some great students. And President Gilkerson talked to you about our great student population. And we're presenting the same classic play that you may know, maybe you read it in high school, of Our Town. But in this version, some of the scenes when the family's at home have been translated into Spanish and Vietnamese. And you're going to meet a couple of characters on their first meeting. And Our Town will be performed on this very stage November 16th, 17th, and 18th. You're going to want to come back. If you're curious, you can go to tinyurl.com/OurTownEVC. But let's bring out Emily. Emily, played by Savannah Castro. Now, Emily is, oh, thank you. Oh, look at that. How nice. Yes, please. In the play, at this point, Emily is about 15 years old. We're in Grover's Corner, New Hampshire. The time is 1901, and Emily is in her garden, and this is really when her relationship with George Gibbs, played by Franco Vu, well, you'll meet George in just a second because he's got his entrance already. George and Emily, this is when they first really have their first talk. All right, I'll hand it over to Savannah and George.
Louisiana Purchase instead. I've worked an awful long time at both of them.
Gee, it's funny. I mean, from my window up there, I can just see your headlights when you're doing your homework over in your room.
Why, can you?
You certainly do stick to it. I don't see how you can sit still that long. I guess you must like school.
Well, I always figure it's just something someone has to go through.
Yeah,
I don't mind it, really. It helps pass the time.
yeah. Emily, what do you think? We might work out a kind of telegraph from your window to mine. And once in a while, you could give me a kind of hint or two about one of those algebra problems. I don't mean the answers, Emily. Of course not. Just some little hint.
Oh, I think hints are allowed. So, you get stuck, George. Just whistle to me and I'll give you a hint.
Emily, you're just naturally bright, I guess.
I figure it's just the way a person's born.
Yeah. But you see, I want to be a farmer, and my Uncle Luke says, and if I'm ready, I can come over and work in his farm. And if I'm any good, I can just gradually have it.
You mean the house and everything?
Yeah. Well, thanks. I better be getting out to the baseball field. Thanks for talking. Good afternoon, Mrs. Webb.
Thank you so much, actor. And thank you for having us. Please do come back and see the play in November. We'd love to have you and celebrate the community with you. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's wonderful, really wonderful. We're going to take a break. We have carefully timed this break so that it coincides with the test of the National Emergency Broadcasting System. We think our phones are going to go off. I don't know if that means they're going to be humming or pitching or screaming at us for continuously, or if it's just a beep. I don't know what it will be. But we think that will happen at 11:20. So enjoy the test, enjoy refreshing your drinks, grab a pastry, but we want you back here no later than 11:25. 11:25, and then you'll meet our distinguished panel. See you soon. Folks, we are going to resume our program, and we'll be joined by people that are streaming in. I feel honored to introduce this group. We reached out to people that we thought could help us grapple with the findings of the poll and reconcile the findings with their deep expertise, and then talk about the tensions between fact and perception. So I, for one, am very much looking forward to this conversation. Let me introduce you to our panelists. I'm going to just go in order. This is Ian Griffiths. Ian is the executive director of a group called Seamless Bay Area, and Ian and his team are tackling the Bay Area's transit challenges and doing it in a way that is thoughtful and highly effective, including to the point of introducing legislation in the State House that would reconfigure and reorganize and rethink the way we're providing transit right now in this region. Next is Jennifer Loving. Jen is the president and CEO of Destination Home, and she and her team join with a host of others across the region doing what I consider to be amazing work, heroic work. It is her mission in life to address homelessness, to reduce the number of homelessness. In the course of her work, she's mobilized millions and millions of dollars for that endeavor. And I can tell you factually that the homeless counts would be astronomically greater were it not for Destination Home, Jen Loving, and many others who are joined in that effort. I'd like you to meet Dante Lartigue. Dante is running an organization called Raising the Bar. And the mission is to work in particular with youth who are at risk. The mission, again, to prevent homelessness or scenarios that could lead to homelessness. And we're especially grateful to have Dante here because his own life journey has included periods of time when you were unhoused. You don't mind me saying that. So we have lived experience being represented here on stage today. Next, please meet Aegon Turplin. Aegon is one of our brightest Bay Area minds in planning circles. He spent many years at Spur addressing urban planning, transit planning, those sorts of things. He then spent time in the state's capital working on statewide issues. He's now back among us. We're glad that he's back and doing a number of things which include, significantly, helping San Francisco with their downtown planning. So we're eager to have Aegon's perspective. And finally, we need a highly skillful moderator to engage these people in this conversation. So who better than Bert Robinson? Bert is the editor of the San Jose Mercury News and also our partner in putting this poll together. So thank you, Bert. Thank you for everything you mean to us and to the region, and for reporting the facts day after day after day. We do appreciate that. The panel is now in your good hands, and we have until noon, and we'll be signaling you as the noon hour approaches. Thank you.
All right, so do we have a microphone on each end? Is that what we've got?
And one more. Here's one more.
All right. So I have a list of questions, but I encourage the panelists, as I did earlier in our email conversations, to that might not be good, to jump in if I'm directing a question to someone else, but you have something compelling to say about it, which I'm sure is going to be the case on many of these. But I'm going to start here with a question for Aegon. And this is a question that comes off of one of the poll findings regarding downtowns that Russ highlighted in his presentation and that we highlighted in our presentations in the Mercury News in Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, which I hope all of you have seen. A little plug there. According to the poll, 79% of the respondents say they rarely or never go to downtown San Jose. 83% rarely or never go to downtown Oakland, and 70% of Bay Area residents rarely or never go to downtown San Francisco. In that context, the fact that 30% of the residents do go to downtown San Francisco maybe is encouraging, but the reasons that people give for staying away are pretty devastating. Downtown San Francisco is too dirty, people don't feel safe there are too many unhoused people. My questions for you, Aegon, are two. The first one is, did you find those numbers surprising when you saw them? And the second one is, are they a problem for the Bay Area? And if so, what kind of problem are they?
Well, thank you, Bert. It's a great question, a good one to start with. And in some ways, I think this is probably true for all of us. Are we the clinical social scientists here the way Russ was, or are we the kind of planners, policymakers to respond to this? And so I'm going to try to be a little bit of both, but to start with kind of, is this a problem? Well, one thing we don't have is to know the numbers on the downtown question, how they changed before and after COVID. So it's a little bit hard to know exactly the perception, but let me just start by making kind of 3 points related to this that we can dive into. One, I actually think the downtown numbers make the point that downtowns still matter, right? The fact now, that sounds counterintuitive because most people aren't going downtowns, but I think I would ask us to think about, is there any other place in the Bay Area that's getting 1/3 of people on a consistent basis? 1/4 of people on a consistent basis. Now there's certainly differences among the 3 downtowns. So that's the first point, right? Think about Santana Row, think about Stanford, think about the Great Mall. That's not getting 1/3 of the region on a consistent basis. So downtowns still matter. So first thing. Second thing is that our perception of these places is also very much shapes our choices, the choices that we make. Is it dirty? Is it not dirty? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? We have to parse that about people who've been there. But in the case of downtown San Francisco, for example, where does it begin and end? Are you asking people about when they get off at Civic Center or at BART Station and they're walking through that area, or are they getting off at Montgomery Street and walking through the core of the financial district, which is the photograph that Russ showed? And actually, some people that I have done on national tours have argued that downtown San Francisco seems cleaner than it's been in 20 years. Again, counterintuitive, but it's certainly emptier. That's unquestionable, right? But that, so is perception driving, and so then your experience in that place. So that's like, and then the third one I think is really the kind of long-term trend, is that land use is actually shaping so many of our decisions. 3/4 of people say they don't want to go to downtown San Jose because there's nothing for them to do. Well, what does that mean? It means that many of the things that we want to do on a daily basis aren't located there, right? And it's not just a question of work, it's a question of entertainment, it's a question of education and healthcare. Many of those facilities, including the facility we're in today, aren't located in the core of our cities, and therefore then that reduces the reason to go to that particular place. So is it a problem? 56% of people in the Bay Area say it's a problem, which means it's actually something that people really want to work on. So that's, I would flip around and say it's an opportunity to really engage and start diving into some of those details.
Let me come in on one thing that you said specifically, which is that the downtowns are certainly emptier than they were, 5 years ago, or before the pandemic is maybe the way we want to think about it. And I think we're all aware that one of the most profound changes that the pandemic has bestowed on the Bay Area and across the country is remote work. One of the primary reasons that downtown San Francisco is emptier, and I would say this of downtown San Jose, where I work myself, is emptier, is because people aren't coming in to go to work. So talk to us a little bit about that issue and what you think that portends for the future of our downtowns.
So the sort of high-level numbers that we see is that, you know, remote work was a very small percentage. Maybe it's now 1/4 of all workers, and the number of people going to and from an office on a weekly basis, it looks like we might get to, we're going to jump up to 50% going in 2-3 days a week. It's going to vary across employers. So the percentage of people going to these places for work within a company is going to change over time. So how would you go back and have 300,000 people showing up in downtown San Francisco on a daily basis? You grow your economy. You actually have more people. So I think the question of remote work becomes one of thinking about, as you continue to grow, what share of that overall growth goes into your core? And if we think back to joint venture and the data going back a couple decades, most of our office space, most of the kind of creation of commercial space isn't in the downtowns, and it isn't near transit, which I think we'll talk to as well. And I think the second one is it really becomes about how do we organize our lives. That a lot of people would go to work, and they might stay after work and go have a drink or have a dinner or go to a play or other things. And once you remove that work piece out of the equation, if most of the time you're driving, you're not going to make as much that special trip to the place. People are, right? Entertainment was the #1 reason to go to these places, but the percentage is going to drop down significantly. So ultimately, and I think we'll probably get into this more, it's about how do we organize our lives in a way that frankly becomes less car dependent, which then becomes about living in communities where we have options to get around in other ways, and then a downtown becomes just another neighborhood we're popping into. When we were only going there for work and you reduce that, that is a big piece of the gap. And that's in part why the Bay Area is so far behind the rest of the country. Because other reasons have drawn people into the cores in addition to just the workplace.
We're going to come back to that transportation challenge, as you mentioned, but I'm going to divert to talk a little bit about homelessness because that was, as Russ underscored, one of the focus areas for our poll and a place where we got some really interesting results that have implications for public policy that, frankly, I'm not sure I understand, but I think our panelists can help us with that. So let me turn to Jennifer Loving first. Jennifer, one of the results that Russ highlighted, and one of the results that to me was the most striking in the poll, was this question. Which of the following statements come closer to your opinion, even if neither is exactly right? Communities should prevent people from living in public places like parks, sidewalks, and under freeways because that is a public safety and public health problem. 73% agreed with that. The alternative, and we forced people to choose one of these two to try to get a little bit of stratification there. The alternative was, as long as there are not enough homes or shelters to house everyone, homeless people have the right to live in public places like parks, sidewalks, and under freeways and keep their possessions with them. 27% agreed with that statement. We had asked this same question 3 years ago in 2020, just before the pandemic began. And in that poll, 64% agreed with the community should prevent people alternative. So that's up 9% over the last 3 years. And 36% agreed with the notion that homeless people have the right to live in public places as long as the area is not providing enough homes or shelters to accommodate them. So that one was up. That one was 36%. So that was up 9%. That was 9% higher, I should say, in 2020 than it is now. Jennifer, I guess my question for you is, what do those numbers tell us about how residents in the Bay Area feel about the challenge of homelessness? And what does it suggest to us in terms of a policy approach that could actually draw broad support from our community?
Those are great questions, and thank you for having me. It's nice to be with you all today. So people are tired of seeing homeless people, right? That's been growing, but it gets conflated with there are more homeless people. That's actually not true. We're starting to, those numbers are staying stable, starting to come down a little bit. This last point in time count pointed that out. And before we talk about the now, let's take a little walk through history. So we didn't have a homelessness problem at scale before Vietnam. Post-Vietnam, housing prices were going up, wages were not keeping pace. This is happening, and as cities are becoming less and less affordable, so like the Bay, other places, homelessness is rising because homelessness is a housing problem. The federal government has not invested anywhere near at scale what is necessary to reduce homelessness in any jurisdiction. For example, here in Santa Clara County, our continuum of care gets about $30 million. That's far less, frankly, than the resources that have been developed over the last few years locally, right, to be able to create homes and create places for people to go. And the pandemic, because of the orders from the CDC, the encampments, there was no more abatements happening, so encampments were not being swept. And that was a safety concern. And people that were living more rurally needed to come closer because water, access to food, things that were happening by volunteer groups, all of that shut down. And so it was really tough, right? And so people came closer. And so now we see more visible homelessness. And unfortunately, it all too often is getting conflated with crime. The truth is that homeless people commit less crimes than the housed population in this country. But because of the visibility, people get blamed for things, right? When in reality, people are just desperately poor. I've been doing this work here for 25 years. I've personally seen thousands and thousands of people get off the streets, but overarching, our community, our system that we have, which is a model that is connected between jurisdictions, the city of San Jose, the county of Santa Clara, the housing authority, a bunch of nonprofits, collectively have housed over 21,000 people permanently. And when people move into housing, and this is the housing first model, we have a 94% housing retention rate. So people move off the streets and they stay housed. And that flies against some of the mythology that we hear, that question about people don't want help. I've never met a person in my career of being proximate to this suffering for 25 years of maybe more than one or two people that didn't want help. What people don't want is to be taken from one place that feels minorly safe and being told they have to go somewhere else and not understanding what any of that is. So that might be where people feel resistance. Just like any of us, if I said, hey, Ian, come with me, I'm gonna find you a new house, you might be like, well, I need to think about that for a minute before I just go with you, right? And so that is, I would say, normal. We would all appreciate some sort of choice. But when we're building actual homes, people are moving into them. And because of Measure A, which has been probably the most profound policy fund to address homelessness in the Bay in our history, we've put 50 new projects to address homelessness into the pipeline in the last 5 years, which is extraordinary for the lowest income folks in the most expensive region in this country. And so, but what we have to balance that against is political reactivity, right? People are upset, polls come out, things must be done. Things must be done. But right now we're focusing on measures, at least politically, that are not solutions to homelessness, that are more, I think of it sometimes like this. You have cancer, and you go to the doctor, and you say, I have cancer, and they say, you do have cancer, and we would love to help you with that cancer, but chemotherapy is really expensive, there's a really long waiting list, you gotta wait like 3 years to get chemo, but we'll give you some pain medicine. Okay. So then, that's kind of what we do when we're providing temporary shelter or temporary lodging for folks. It's not the answer that people need, it's not what ends homelessness, but it is managing people's suffering, managing the community's suffering of not maybe having to see as much visible homelessness. But it's not really solving anything. And so the part of the poll that made me the happiest really was the recognition that people understood that homelessness is a housing problem, and that deeply affordable housing is really what not just homeless people, but I think 44% of the people that are living paycheck to paycheck in our community truly need, which is housing that's affordable to them. And right now in San Jose, you have to make $55 an hour to afford a market rate apartment, and these rents are continuing to rise.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Dante, let me... Got to leave time for the applause. Dante, let me bring this to you, and let me focus on another aspect of the poll regarding homelessness and talk about and Jennifer talked a little bit about this, some of the perceptions that people seem to have about the homelessness issue and about unhoused people specifically. 74% of the respondents to the poll believe that most people in the Bay Area are just a few bad breaks away from being homeless. That was a very high number. I actually found that pretty astonishing. But 59% of the respondents to the poll say they have had an experience with an unhoused person that made them feel physically unsafe. What do you make of those responses? And what do you think, to the extent that you think, and you can tell us, to the extent that you think that those are obstacles for finding solutions to these problems? What do we do to get people to feel a different way, if that's what's needed?
Hello? There we go. So for me, the first part of that question, yeah, most people are really close or on the edge of becoming homeless, or they're dealing with housing instability. I speak mostly in respect to me being a former foster youth coming out of the foster care system. 1 in 2 young people are gonna end up homeless within 2 years of leaving the system. So it's not by choice, right? This is what the survey was talking about. It's not by choice. It's by design almost, right? The system allows us to fall through the cracks, right? The system, in my opinion, does not communicate well. So our housing system, and now it's getting better, but our housing system and our child welfare system for the longest didn't communicate. And young people would have basically very destitute transitions into adulthood. And that's how I ended up homeless. I mean, it's not the first time I ended up homeless with my biological mother. I was homeless and living in a car and stuff like that. But as far as, you know, young people and people in general being one paycheck or, you know, one emergency away from being homeless, that's real, right? You know, I know I'm a father of 4, I have a family of 6, you know. At this point in time, if I lost my job, we would be in trouble, right? My wife's not working at this moment, so we would be in trouble, right? And I tell folks, I told Jen maybe a couple months ago, I'm probably gonna move out of this area because I just can't afford it, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing, and it's not just in regards to the unhoused population, it's other underserved populations that we get these labels put on us. So when I go to a property manager, for instance, say, hey, this is what I do. I basically act as a guarantor for foster youth coming out of the foster care system. I'm acting as like a parent or a parent figure. I want to rent out this place. They say, foster youth? They're homeless? No, we can't confuse foster youth with just being unhoused or troubled. And that's the thing, is we convolute these things and we put labels on people for whatever reason. And a lot of times it's in my experience, it's been an experience someone had. So having an unsafe experience with someone that is unhoused can cloud your whole judgment. But I've had many, many, many unsafe situations with housed people. So my thing is how do we, on the surface of it, just see the person in front of us? How do we show grace, you know? And a lot of times, I think it's challenging to do that because we are not thinking in the moment, right? We're not thinking, we're being reactive, right? And so I tell people a lot of times, you know, a lot of people say, I couldn't imagine you being homeless. I couldn't imagine you being I was a dually involved youth, meaning I was a justice engaged youth. Most people can't imagine me being a former felon, all these things, because they say you have this great smile, you're charismatic, you talk well, which that's the one I don't like much, but at the end of the day, I'm a person, you're a person. Our differences are, in my experience, our differences are, they're relevant, but they're not as important as our similarities. And we don't talk about that enough. And so see the person in front of you before you judge them. A lot of times we walk around downtown and we'll see a person that's homeless and we won't even acknowledge them. And in our last point in time count, we also, you know, I was a part of a lived experience advisory board that helped facilitate a statewide survey through UCSF, right? And when we were interviewing some people say, people don't even see me, I'm invisible, right? I haven't been acknowledged in 20 years. That's hard. So we have to be able to, on the surface, see each other and acknowledge each other, right?
Thank you very much, Dante. That was terrific. All right, I'm going to switch to public transportation for a few minutes and go to Ian. Ian, there's wide agreement at this point, I think, that the Bay Area's public transit systems are facing an existential crisis. And the polls sought to find out what people think we should do about that. So we asked about providing additional financial support. 56% of the people said they think that transit systems need additional financial support. And then, as Russ pointed out, we asked them what kind of financial support they would be in favor of. And the numbers were very low. If we're going to put something in front of the voters of this region and ask them to support more money into the public transit systems, the numbers are going to have to be a lot higher than what we saw in the poll. With reference to the numbers, and let me throw in one other number here, that only 19% of the Bay Area rides public transportation as often as once a week. What's it going to take to save the system?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for having me. I think on the bright side, I think this is encouraging. I think this is consistent with what we see in other polls, that still a majority of people say that, and even though majority of people aren't riding transit very often, a majority of people see value in public transit. This question in this particular survey was talking specifically about commuter rail. If you expand that question, and I've seen it in other surveys, to transit more generally, you see support in the high 70s and 80s even, and so people do understand. I'm confident, I don't see anything here that's showing me any differently, that people don't see the value in public transportation. But it's a really tough value proposition to say you need to pay more money for the system that you already have. That's just not a winning
and aren't using.
Yeah, though, I mean, but prior to the pandemic, I looked this up, about a third, actually you had a different, I didn't catch the joint venture prior poll number, but I looked at a different poll. So about a third of people were using transit, were like regular transit users before the pandemic. This is about 20%, 1 in 5. So it's definitely gone down, and it is in the process of going up. Like every week we're seeing people return to transit. I wonder if the timing of this poll also is right at the end of summer. Even in the past month, I bet you would see some movement on that statistic of people, with fall schedules and schools starting and offices maybe starting, more days of the week. I think you will see that number continue to go up. But the value proposition to win at the ballot, which is what we're going to need to do within the next couple of years, we're going to need a major new funding source. We need to have a really powerful proposition of a better system, a vision of a better system and a path to getting there. That's what we see, and that people, I think what these relatively low numbers are showing in terms of willingness to pay for an existing system that in many people's view might be even deteriorating or not as good as it used to be. I think that's where we have a big, that's where the challenge is for policymakers to really understand, do more polling and understand what are the things that are popular, what are the reforms that people need to see so that they can see themselves using public transit more often. And I thought it was a telling, the other question that I thought was interesting is the forced question of saying, well, would you like to should we be funding or prioritizing funding our commuter rail systems, or should we be funding bus systems? And to me, that choice before voters, it's a tough choice because it's in a way it's a bit of a false choice. It's like saying, do you want to fund highway maintenance or arterial maintenance? And the reality is, you need both to get where you need to go to live your lives. And for transit to be useful, you need both. We need buses and rail systems to work together. So I think that's where the path forward needs to be. I think this is really helpful information for us to know, maybe not to how to frame, the value proposition of what transit can do for you if we're not really offering something that's better than the status quo.
All right, thanks very much, Ian. Okay, panelists, I knew that the amount of time that we were allotted was going to end up feeling very short. So we're going to go here in the last 5 minutes to the lightning round. I'm going to ask a question that I would love to have anybody jump in on. There's a particular question that we've asked every year in the Silicon Valley poll, and it's the one that seems to draw the most public attention year after year, and it's what we call the Exodus question. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? I am likely to move out of the Bay Area in the next few years. And what we have seen consistently over the last several years is that about half of the people who are responding to the poll say, yes, I'm likely to move out of the Bay Area in the next few years. I have seen that question asked around the country, and it's high, but it isn't high like that. So what I'd like to pose, and again, just jump in and let me know what you think, is what does it mean for a region? What does it mean for a community of people when half of us want to split?
We have the highest rates of income inequality in the country here. So either you have means or you really don't. And you can afford to live in a lot of other places more easily, especially if you make less than $55 an hour, which is many, 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 many people. And so I don't know what we're thinking is going to happen if we're not adding housing that's affordable, having a transit system that works for everybody. You know, I mean, we would expect these consequences, I would think.
I think that's 100% correct. This is I mean, a huge piece of this is housing cost, right? And this is a region that's generated a lot of employment, but it is one that has a significant amount of income inequality. One interesting thing that wasn't pointed out is the gap between the direction of people's lives and the region and the state and the country. 85% say their life is going in a good direction, but only 38% say California, and lower for the region and the country. So in some level, there are...
That might be all the people who are planning to leave, though.
Well, I mean, which is interesting. So if people people come to this region for opportunity, and people are leaving because maybe they don't have a sense of opportunity, the environment here. But I think it really speaks to how there's an interconnectivity between all of these places. What binds us to the Bay Area? Is it family? Is it work? If you have stable housing, you might stay here. But if you don't have a strong sense of your community, your neighborhood, going to the core, your downtown, these other things, then what is it that makes the Bay Area a kind of a home to you? And this is a region that's kind of grown up and down. Think about Santa Clara County over the years. So I think it's troubling, but it also speaks specifically to the types of issues people are working on.
Dante, you said that you're one of those people who's planning to leave.
I was gonna say that I'm also part of the 85. Like, I think just growing up how I grew up, I'm a part of that 85% that says my life is getting better. However, I cannot afford to be here. So people that are coming here, they're coming here for an opportunity, and when they get here, they realize they can't afford the opportunity. And then people that have been here, right, these are folks that are literally being outpaced by that opportunity just due to inflation and other things. So at the end of the day, I think, you know, for me, I told my wife if it doesn't get a little better financially for us, we will have to leave. But I love the school district that my kids are in versus the one that I went to, right? I love the resources and the perks that community has, but do I see myself being reflected in that as a black man? My kids are multicultural, they're, you know, half Filipino and half black, and they don't look like me all the time, right? So their experience is very different. So I think for me, it varies, right? But I can't afford to be here.
Ian, take us home.
Sure, I'll just comment on I think that high rate of wanting to leave. I mean, the number one concern was cost of housing. Number two was cost of living. And even though transportation came up lower there, the second biggest household cost after housing is transportation. We bake in that cost. For so many, it is literally impossible to live here without certainly a car, but in households where there's two income earners, you know, multiple cars. And that adds a huge amount to the cost of living here. And that should be one of the benefits of living in the Bay Area. That's what people, you know, think of, like, move to the Bay Area, oh, this is a region with transit, you know, but it's less and less a region with transit. And it more and more, like, with deteriorating quality of transit, as well as people perceiving it to be unsafe, it's actually increasing people's costs of living here. People have purchased cars there was a huge amount of people buying cars during the pandemic for safety reasons, but for other reasons. So I think improving transportation is part of reducing the overall cost of living here, and again, framing that as something that makes life more affordable to live here, to be here, is maybe how we can begin to change that perception.
Rose Hancock, you will never get a more punctual panel than this one.
Thank you for that. How about our panel? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You have brought expertise, you brought experience, you brought insight for all of those things. We truly thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our proceeding is concluded. Thank you for being a part of this.